Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Board Explorer Live with me, Richard Vobes. It is the 19th, I think. It is the 19th of October, 2020. And it's just coming up to 4 o'clock, a little bit early. We are looking at the Sussex Peep show with Walter Wilkinson, not Wilkinson, Walterson, or anyway. And I've got a big warm jacket on because it's a bit chilly in the studio. So, Julia, if you're watching when we do the Vogue show tonight, bring something warm. Welcome to the last part, and it's a very short part. It's almost hardly worth putting on the stream for it. It's only a few pages left to go of this rather interesting book. And last time I wasn't reading terribly well, and we ran out of time, and we've just got the end to go. So we're going to get through to the end of that. Just been sorting out some comments on both Facebook and YouTube with our stuff that we do. And oh my God, people are so keen to sort of shut down free speech or abuse you. It's a very strange world that we live in. However, that's not to concern us here. Hello to TurboStream, who says good afternoon from a cloudy Birmingham. Yeah, we've had some sunshine this morning, but it's gone cloudy this afternoon. He says, I'm trapped by the Poppy, the black and white cat, who is sat on my lap in the garden. Send help. Help is on its way, in the form of a mouse. John F., good afternoon to you. Nigel Sadler, hello, back from his trip with Mark Withercue. Michael White, good afternoon. Justin Jones, hello to you. Thank you for your very kind offer. I have emailed you back. That's a big yes, please. Just got to sort out a suitable time to do it. The lovely Julia, hello, lovely Julia, who was here, and she came over for lunch and ended up cooking it, basically, whilst I lulled her son to sleep. It was a fair exchange. TurboStream, I've said hello to him. Oh, he says, no, she's too old to be bothered catching a bird. Ah, bless. Billabong O'Neill, hello to you. Nice to see you. And Philip Hammond and no doubt Mary, I'm sure. Good afternoon, Richard and Julia. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much. And then I'm sorry, Turbo, you'll have to sit it out. Yeah, sorry about that. You can't escape the show today. So, we're coming up to the end. And if you remember, I can't quite remember it got a little bit vague as to where Walter was at the end. And he's on his way, I think, to Lewis, isn't he? He's on his way to Lewis. And he ends up somewhere, he climbs up. I got a bit confused because he started to talk about, oh yes, under the Downs to Lewis. What I propose is that I just read from the beginning of that chapter again, just to get us back into it. Mr. Sadler has been up on the Downs above where he was and sent in some video, so we can have a look at that as well at the appropriate moment. I'm not quite sure when the appropriate moment is, but we're going to see how we get on. Morton Lewis, hello to you. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming in. A special hello to Poppy the cat. Yes, Poppy the cat does like listening to this nonsense. So this is chapter 5, 6, 7, 17. 17. I don't know how many chapters there are. Where the Downs end. Oh, it's chapter 18. So there's two half chapters. So I just thought if I go back. So sorry if this is all sounding like it's repeating itself. Coffee is just reviving the spirit of the day. Welsh Wanderer, hello to you. Jason Patrick, good afternoon. Hope you're well. And I hope they haven't completely shut down Wales. So, the narrow road at the foot of the Downs wandered on over the first gentle slopes of the hills, an enchanting road that enticed me from my duties. It was such a clear day after the storm, and the road so immensely pretty after the brickbats which had gathered around the railway station at Hassocks, that it would have been a crime not to have taken advantage of it. Oh yes, this is ringing bells. Don't speak too soon, says Julia. The rain is never that far away. Oh, I see. If a millionaire flung his gold at your feet, you would seize it with avidity, or avidly, I suppose we might say. When the gods pour out their gifts, we should accept them with alacrity. Alacrity, sorry. Words I don't use very frequently. Alacrity. I don't know actually what alacrity means. What does alacrity mean? If shy Aurora opens wide her gates, we should bask in the sunny beams of day, ripen like the grapes, and be filled with sweetness. If zephyrs whisper their songs, I'm not quite, when zephyrs, is that a god? Whisper their zephyrs, they must be some sort of, angel-y thing. Whisper their songs, we should stand and listen, catching the faintest notes with our hearts, until our hearts are stilled. All of which I did on that morning, leaving the barrow under a bush so that I would climb the hills and sit in the sun to admire the green banks, the trees, and the great sea of fields and woods stretching away to the Surrey hills. At West Meston there is a church, and the farms to see, and after that more farms and trees, and then trees and farms and trees, and always the silent hills above you and the weald below. The road runs visibly before you over the little hills, and you can look back here and there and see the ribbon of road that you have travelled. It is altogether a charming road for a pedestrian, if it was not for the awkward fact that to be a pedestrian on modern roads is to feel rather a fool. Such a number of things on wheels go bowling by, and at such a busy pace that you feel a bit of a stick in the mud. As the smart car with 3 or 4 people passes, you are envious that life goes so easily for them. With all that speed and excitement, you feel that they must be travelling to some delectable ends. But in the quietness and peace which fall over the earth when they have passed, you know that they are being rushed through all this lovely downland with only a cheap impression of it, and that probably they are dashing off to do some dirty work in order to pay for the car, which plays such tricks upon them. I think that's a true thing, isn't it? You look at people who have these big flash cars. I remember working at a corporate event, and I was there to entertain people who were selling computers to shops and small companies who sold them to the public. So they were a sort of salesman middleman, really, who were selling to shops, which in a way are a sort of middleman between the manufacturer. Anyway, so there's this huge sales force all on desks and phones, and every now and again different companies like Hitachi, printer companies like I can see it in my mind but I can't think of them. HP is another one, and computer companies, I don't know, like Packard Bell. They would all have a deal on a certain day or between certain hours, and they would say, if a company was to buy 20 of their computers for their shop, they would get a 70% discount or whatever it might be. And these guys were there on the phones, ringing all their contacts and their clients and saying, look, okay, we've got this deal. If you buy 20 computers, you get 70% off, but you have to do it within the next 2 hours. And so they would be pitching it, and then, people would be coming back to them going, yeah, okay, we'll have 20. In fact, we'll have 40 of them because we can offload them and they'll do a special deal for the public, and so on and so forth. So this would go on. And when I arrived in a clapped out old car that I usually have, I would notice in the car park all these amazing cars that these people were earning a lot of money to be able to afford to drive. And when I spoke to them, I discovered that they would turn up at something like 7:30 in the morning and go home at something like 7:30 at night. And I thought, well, that's a lot of work they have to do to afford the cars they've got in the car park so that they can sit in a little bit more comfort in a traffic jam to and from work. I just couldn't see how that equated, really. Whereas I could earn a lot less money, but actually enjoy the time that I'm not working, because they would be working so much longer, although I might not be sitting in quite so much luxury in my little old banger than they would be in their Daimler or whatever it was. And I never could quite work out why having all this expensive stuff that they constantly were having to work for would mean. So I absolutely get it that in the quietness and peace that fall over the earth when they've passed, you know that they're being rushed through all the lovely downland with only a cheap impression of it, and that they're probably dashing off to do some dirty work in order to pay for the car which has played the tricks on them. And you absolutely get that. Sweet consolation. That's what I should have said. You give the vagabond a barrow. You give the vagabond barrow an extra push, step out a little faster on your old-fashioned, out-of-date, ridiculous, unmechanical legs, and are tolerably content until the next vehicle comes roaring by. It's so true. Everything is getting onto wheels since the ice cream cycles were a success. What is this unwieldy chariot approaching with a tall chimney and smoke flying? Oh yes, I remember this bit. The Sussex air is suddenly smells like a slum. And as the swaying car swings by, large letters invite you to stop him and buy fried fish. That's extraordinary, isn't it? It's like an ice cream van, but as a fish van, a fish and chip van. The rich odour hangs in the air for a considerable piece of the road, and it is some time before you emerge into the fresh air again. Among the usual grocery and baker's vans there passes a saloon car with its interior hung with blouses and silk dresses. A travelling library rushes by, a complete hardware shop, and then a fishmonger, all of which break up the placid country feeling. For a change, the ice cream barrow wanders slowly round the corner, and after a sonata on the bell, I love that phrase, the lad shouts to some labourers hoeing in a field. Oh yes, I remember this. They are not purchasers, so the lad leans elegantly and idly on his box and asks them if it is warm work. Don't their backs ache? If they won't come, shall he bring them the ices? Nice ices? Keep you cool, mate. The labourers go on doggedly with their hoeing, ignoring the lad who takes such an unfair advantage. There is excitement when the narrow road is filled with the monster labelled Mammoth, a rolling behemoth of huge timbers and iron guerdons, the six leathern bolsters of Leviathan, Leviathan bolsters of rubber. In its midst sits the little pink driving man, and all your pride and piloting, a mere barrow about the world, is gone. As the vast destroyer slows down and you squeeze by gingerly in its shade, you rather wish that you could tell the tale of driving such a bold, oversized monster through the length of the land. It was after passing two of these terrifying giants that I came to a grassy track leading to an old quarry, and leaving the barrow behind a bush, I wandered away from the road for a little relief. The rough grass led me behind some woods where it was distinctly restful to hear the larks singing and to see a man ploughing with a couple of horses, which stamped up the hill with some jingling and flashing of brass, and vigorous, handsome movements that brought a new vigour and strength to one's own physique. The horse-plough begins to look curiously old-fashioned. To watch a ploughman skillfully guiding his plough and his horses over the undulations of the field was as good as a circus. And to come from the road to that scene was like looking back over the barrier of modernity into ancient and forgotten days. The quiet world behind the woods invited me strongly to pitch the camp and be done with the road for that day. But I had not the courage to give in so early in the day, and went back to my pushing. I think that's where we got up to. So where do we think he is? Nigel Sadler, do you know where he is? He's above Westmeaston. I don't know that place at all, really. I must go and find out more about it. What is it called? Westmeaston. By this time, the motor coaches were beginning to creep out from their holiday towns. Oh, no, I do remember this bit. And it was embarrassing to find the Barrow a matter of great interest to them. Oh, yes. A coach would advance, the passengers sitting very sedately, staring at the Downs with their 5 shillings worth of expectancy, another beautiful phrase, and then they would see the Barrow and actually a pedestrian. The experience would be invaluable to our caricaturists, and if Fogassi and Mr. Bateman could only borrow my truck and push it past a few motor coaches, they would have enough intense, surprised, exaggerated, funny faces to last them as models for many a day. Eyebrows shoot up in alarming heights, teeth appear in flashing, terrifying rows. Peculiar glances, sideways, downways, and across long noses, leave an indelible impression upon the mind. It is pathetic to find how easily human beings can be disturbed by something a little out of the ordinary. They can sit in those coaches, those dangerous vehicles, and sleep within a hairbreadth of death through a whole day. But when a barrow and the pedestrian come by, it is as if some electric current goes through the company and jerks the rows of automations into a grotesque and grinning life. You can just picture it. It's so beautifully put. In between the vehicles, and by frequent excursions from the road, I saw something of the lovely Sussex, and on going into a bungalow shop for a few necessities, had a few sympathetic words from the robust old dame there. She apologised for having to go off into the background to get some change. "I don't keep much change in the shop," she said. "There isn't much cash about nowadays, and some of them would knock you down for a shilling." And perhaps a good deal less, I thought, as I passed one more dead bird on the road. In an hour or so, one can pass 6 pathetic little bodies lying on their backs, 2 stiff legs in the air, and their eyes closed for ever, while in the bushes the fledglings can cry for food in vain. I saw one chaffinch flying low from point to point in the hedge, when suddenly it was drawn into the draught of a passing car. The flustered bird struggled in the maelstrom, but after a wild, headlong minute it was dashed against the radiator, was held to it by the pressure of the headwind, and carried away. It was a sudden and horrid tragedy. But why be pathetic on account of the birds? On that road the gutter was full with broken snail shells, and almost at any moment I liked to stop and listen, and I could hear the thrush in the bushes tap, tap, tapping his victims to pieces on the sacrificial stone. The busy road was a queer conglomeration of sensations. At one moment Sussex presented the slowly unfolding panorama of the sunny country, the eternal fields and hills, and the next minute the cars and lorries, like dominating invaders from another world, inundated the composed and lovely scene with all the racket of a dozen towns. But in the evening all this passed. The world retired from the country, and turning down a by-road, I came to a red cottage, sheltered by its orchard and beautified by its flowers, and found there a cheerful family who readily put their fields at my disposal for camping. I hope I haven't read all this. Have I gone back rather far? And they introduced me to the well-ringed round with bright... Sorry. And they introduced me to the well ringed round with bright nasturtiums. Nasturtiums. Is that how you pronounce it? Nasturtiums? As the sun went down, the rich light mellowed the hills into a great colourful dignity. Deep, mysterious shadows crept into the combes. The groups of elms and the fields deepened with the evening, and under the all-pervading beauty of the sky, a sombre radiance prevailed. Human voices rang out and died away. Birds sang their last songs in the sweet, clean air, and there seemed to be a quiet undercurrent of murmuring music, as if the great earth was contemplating itself contentedly upon a glorious day spent well, or well spent. The summer, contrary to custom, we have had this summer weather. This summer, contrary to custom, we have had summer weather, and the next day I walked on once again in the hottest day of the year, or the hottest day for 60 years, or the hottest July for 80 years, or the hottest July day in the third week of the month for 90 years. I forget the exact statistic, but it was a very hot day, and instead of eating some lunch, I fell asleep under the bushes. Then I walked on, and came to a high road with a river running through the fields in a valley below, and at the end of the valley rose the town of Lewes on its hill, blue and mysterious in the misty, shimmering heat. The road mounted the hill and wandered on romantically over the valley, with the hill town always in sight, its castle at the very top, rising picturesquely from among the trees. By some bits of downland and past some homely allotments, I entered the town, and came up at once to a hilly street of flinty cottages. Halfway up the hill I abandoned the heavy barrow, leaving it in the care of a fat old lady at the cottage door, who said that she would not be responsible for it, and finished the rest of the incline with my hands in my pockets. There must be an example of everything in Lewes, from the ancient Saxons till Woolworths, and a pleasant hilly town it is to wander in, with all the shops selling the latest and most desirable articles. There are excellent picturesque inns, and the grocers and confectioners are invitingly stocked. There are elegant 18th century looking houses, and ancient intricate houses with red roofs and cosy dormers. There are rugged stony roofs without dormers, and many houses built of flints. The castle is a flint, and from its towers you can look down on the roofs of Lewes and over the surrounding fields to the circling downs with their great white cliffs made by the quarryings. In the museum are titbits of all the ages, and in the High Street it was appropriate to come upon a groom struggling with a spirited cob in this proper country town. The compact, glossy little animal came steadily up the High Street when, being confronted with a large lorry, he sprang like a cat onto the pavement. His hooves clattered on the stones, and the pedestrians scattered in all directions. Brought to the road again, he made a sudden dash down a side-turning, was turned, headed again for the main road, and proceeded to dance his objections until all traffic, pedestrian and otherwise, was suspended. He circled in the road, clattered on the pavement, attempted to tip his rider off, and to scrape his legs against shop windows and walls. It was a delightful little circus which brought heads out of windows and cameras out of cases, and for a moment conjured up the Lewes of older days. The centre of the town was too hilly and busy for a Punch and Judy, and after speculating about pitches and gazing at the sights and taking some tea, I went back to the barrow, lost the way, circled back to the high street, wandered about many narrow ways, and when I was utterly lost, was cheered to see my own barrow looking at me from the end of a street. Out on the way out of Lewes, I looked about for a pitch, but it was not until I reached the bottom of the town among the rows of cottages, a little world of flint cottages, half-timbered cottages, and decoratively tiled cottages, that I put up the show in the grubby side street, collected some grubby, noisy children, and provoked loud laughter from a woman who, with folded arms, leaned against her front door, and who exclaimed continually, "Well, we didn't need to go to the pictures tonight." She was the first to step up and contribute when I appeared with the hat, and with robust exhortations she saw that everyone else contributed too. "Now then, Mr. Gates," she cried to a shy-looking elderly man, "I saw you laughing. You ought to put something in the hat. Mrs. Payne, there's all your family been in the front row. You mustn't forget the bank." The jocular woman cheered us all up immensely, and I walked out of Lewes in a very good temper, walking by the river, running by the road. Well, walking by the river that was running by the road, and with sheep and cows and horses gazing under the very windows of this homely red-roofed historic town on the hill. Turning from the main road, a narrow way prevented me under the tall elms, and I came to a forgotten farm, buried in the trees, with tumbled thatched barns and cowsheds. The farmer finished his evening shave, and took me along to survey his fields, that the tent might be pitched in the very best place, a pitch sheltered by the hanging wood, and looking over the flat fields to a world of sunny hills. And now we're on the last chapter. It must be the last chapter, chapter 8. How are we doing? Marvellous. Let me just have a look at your comments, because I'm aware that I haven't played this video, which I think was at the beginning where he left, where all the charabangs and the lorries and all of that, if I remember rightly. Nigel Sadler says, "I'm off to explore Lewes in a couple of weeks. I'll look out for his barrow." Yeah, just in case he's lost it. I'm in the car in a minute. I think it was just above where he is. Okay, good. Let's just go back. "I wish there was a fish and chip van around here," says Alan Sandell. Good afternoon to you. Bring back the fish and chips van. I don't remember the fish and chips van. I mean, we have the vans and things that do burgers and things, the burger vans, don't we? Excuse me. So I suppose it's just a variant of that. Barrier of modernity into ancient and forgotten days. Ah, yes. Kenneth Bird, CBE, 1877, known by the pen name Forgas, was a British cartoonist, apparently. Ah, thank you, Linda. Used to get a small bag of chips from Brighton Station while waiting for the second bus on the way home from the King Alfred, says Alan Sandell. Ah, yeah, I know the King Alfred, yeah. Global warming so long ago. Yes, that's right. They didn't seem to be too worried about that in the late 20s and 30s. So let's have a look. Woolies. How do we miss them exactly? The wonder of Woolies. That's the wonder of Woolies. Ba-ba-ba-ba-bum. That's the wonder of a Woolies Christmas. Still remember it. B&M have taken over from Woolworths by name. Oh, B&M. I still don't know what B&M is. A bit late. Andrew Norris, been chopping wood, will catch at the beginning later. What ho to you. So this is the view from the hill that Nigel was up at Ditchling, looking down, if I remember rightly. Let's just have a look at it. It's silent, so there's no audio as such. So presumably I can talk over it. But that's on Ditchling, up at Ditchling Hill, Ditchling Beacon, looking down. That's looking down on the villages and the beautiful Weald in the north of the Downs, if I've got that correct, with the North Downs in the far, far distance. Oh, that was it. That was quicker than I imagined. I looked at it before. Thank you very much, Nigel, for doing that. We should do that. We should do that more frequently. If people have got, if we do a book where I'm nowhere near the place and can't go out and look at it, we should get people to go and film the locations. That would be quite good. So this is the last chapter. Shall we do that and then we can discuss? This is chapter 18. Where the Downs End. I have an invitation for us to visit Alfriston, said Winifred, who had joined the show business again. We shall have a garden to camp in and an audience of 2 for the show. It'll be lovely. We can get there today, and if we're off early, there should be time to see some of the village. Alfriston sounds like one of the show places of Sussex. We better see what Mr. E.V. Lucas, in his graceful way, has to say about it, suggested I, beginning to turn over the sleeping bags, coats, rucksacks, and paper bags in search of the highways and byways of Sussex, which I have in the other room behind me. So you won't be able to find it, and I believe Linda Kane also has a copy I saw on her shelf this morning when I took coffee with Linda Kane, which was very pleasant. Better pack first, said the astute good wife. It will be nice to read about it as we're going. We packed in the sunny meadow, pulled past the new haystack, went out of the gate by the handsome Teazles, walked through the crowd of staring heifers, and so came to the narrow road making its quiet way to Glynde. There's an ant on here. But it's a fly of some description. Fly away, little fella. Yes, Glynde. As we pulled, we held the book open before us and read about the village street, its ancient cross, and the famous old inn with its carvings, and the red lion figurehead salvaged from a Dutch wreck. Oh, about Alfriston, yes, of course. That's where we'll do the show, we said. Then there was the church and the clergy house. That's the first house bought by the National Trust, isn't it? Was it the National Trust or the other? English Heritage. I think it was National Trust. We would certainly see those. We gathered that many hills rose about Alfriston, and in spite of Mr. Lucas's pessimistic comment, few persons, however, are left who climb hills, even grass hills, if they can help it. We hope to be among the few who do. Alfriston became altogether alluring as we read of smugglers, horse-dealers, mendicant friars, and legends of the church. But on this quiet road to Glynde, between the hedges under Cliff Hill, we did not hurry, but took to heart Mr. Lucas's A Song Against Speed. Of speed the saviour and the sting none but the weak deride, but are the joy of lingering about the countryside. The swiftest wheel, the conjuring run, we count no privilege, beside acquiring in the sun the secret of the hedge. Glynde, with its Elizabethan mansion, its timbered cottages, and the remarkable forge under the trees with its great wooden horseshoe door, almost made us forget Alfriston. But we moved on to the busier road, and by degrees came to Selmerston, where we lunched very pleasantly on the margin of a field. We buckled to and marched again, and just after passing Berwick, looking extremely ancient, timbered, and handsome beneath its many trees, we turned into the valley of the Cuckmere, and walking by the willow-planted fields between the hills, we were soon at our destination. Alfriston was there with its cross and a green tree in a compact little square, very place for Punch and Judy, but unfortunately the square was full of omnibuses, cars, and immense operations with electric cables. In fact, On the Saturday afternoon, the village street, what with hikers and motorists, teas and old curiosity shops, was a bit of a fun city, and leaving the historic Alfriston, we found our camp in a new garden of modern houses. Pitching camp and giving performance in the garden to the surrounding elite wore away the rest of the day, and we retired to our camp for the night to wriggle about on the garden grass, which is always harder and altogether less receptive than the turf in the meadows. But that was nothing to us. Tomorrow we would explore Alfriston. The morning was grey and dour, and the clouds clustered over Windover Hill. Before we had breakfasted, the rain was upon us, a wild, drenching rain, the sort of wet rain that only people with a change of clothing could possibly pass through. We waited patiently in the tent, with a view of the garden hedge before us, and through the interstices we could see an odd dog, the legs of a milkman, and a few reckless inhabitants of Alfriston, descendants of smugglers, no doubt, who were brave enough to walk in the downpour. The rain continued, and the road became a river. We were dry and warm enough, but rather alarmed by the presence of an enormous cabbage, which, with its cold dripping leaves, nearly filled and flooded the tent. After a damp and splashing struggle, the cabbage was subjugated to the stew pot, and we settled down in warmth and dryness again. We sat and sat, sitting on the floor of the tent, within a hairbreadth of the dripping world. More legs passed the hedge. We were presented with lettuces, large, damp lettuces. The rain continued. It grew worse, hissing horribly in the black poplars, and a growing wind dashed upon the tent. The rain softened the earth, and the wind playfully pulled up our pegs, which we patiently refixed. And since by this time all our dishes were dirty, we stood in the rain, wrapped and hooded, almost unrecognisable as human figures, and washed the pots and plates. After this disturbing exodus, we settled down again in the tent to read. Our library was not large at the moment. We had the Pickwick papers, which we had brought with, which we thought would carry us through an hour or two, until the perpetual comfort of good living. We had the Pickwick papers, which we thought would carry us through an hour or two, until the perpetual comfort and good living of the Pickwickians made us green with envy. In our cramped quarters, with the rain so near and creature comforts so far, we were expected to enjoy this sort of thing. "Here, waiter!" shouted a stranger, ringing the bell with tremendous violence. Glasses round, brandy and water, hot and strong and sweet and plenty." Every little misadventure finished up on this note. Dinner followed dinner, comfortable inns followed food, an incredible succession of glasses of wine, hot punch and cold punch, solaced them all in their difficulties. Oh, this is in the book. The Pickwick Papers, I gather. Mr. Snodgrass, having concluded his ablutions, took a survey of the room, while standing with his back to the fire, sipping his cherry brandy with heartfelt satisfaction. We looked around the thin flapping tent with our backs to the wind, not sipping cherry brandy or experiencing anything at all particular in the way of heartfelt satisfaction. We began to think of moving to the inn, but since it had rained so long, we decided to sit out the storm in the tent and brave the adversity of camping. We turned to the papers and reviews, but all literature written by those luxurious fellows in editorial offices or in the easy comfort of dry rooms seemed poor, unreal stuff. Good enough for the railway journey, an hour or two by the fire, or to induce a sound sleep at night, we thought. But here with a shaving of the wild elements, it did not prove, as Walt Whitman might have said. We abandoned the papers and looked at the hedge again, with the flood waters gleaming through it. Not a cheerful sight on this wet Sunday evening in a tent. But through the flood came ploughing 3 bicycle wheels, together with the sound of a constantly ringing bell, sure signs of delectation. And dashing through the rain with an elan, I caught the ice cream lad, and we enlivened the camp in the chilly hours with the colder shock of ice cream. It was a curious sauce to wet the hours, but it was potent, and we progressed from ices to a mouth organ, and then a flageolet. That's not how it's a flageolet, is it? That's an instrument of some description, isn't it, if I remember rightly? And finally, to mouth organ and flageolet combined. I don't know how you pronounce that. Flageolet. Flagiolet. We were joined by a dog, a dripping terrier, who crept demurely into the tent, and being very pleased with his surroundings, began to shake himself with vigour. He objected to the sort of music we could produce, and relying on his own good taste, we ceased, whereupon he lay down to sleep. Again we discussed the advisability of forsaking the tent and going to the inn, when suddenly our eyes fell upon the crossword puzzle. Warm hell, vulgarly, in 5 letters, said Winifred, biting the pencil. Warm hell, vulgarly, in 5 letters, I repeated, in the approved fashion. Vulgarly warm hell, what can it be? Murmured Winifred a little later. Hell warmed vulgarly? Let me see. I contributed to the elucidation. It was delicious. We snuggled a little further into our sleeping bags and blankets, and gazing upwards reflectively at the flies, spiders, and earwigs crawling on the roof of the tent, we allowed our minds dreamily to contemplate the question of how to warm hell vulgarly. We tried more definitions, and imagined that we had solved some. The rain continued, and the light of day passed away. But we still came back with fascinated interest to the problem of warming hell in 5 letters, and finally we slept, so exhausted that hidden words and pouring rain worried us no longer. It was perfectly exasperating to find the rain still there in the morning. And bother it, how did one warm hell vulgarly in 5 letters? It was all very annoying, and getting a little damp too, and after 24 hours we thought there was no good chance of the rain stopping. Not it. The morning passed, and we lunched, and we found ourselves in the village school preparing to give a performance. But the rain was as enthusiastic as ever after 30 hours of ceaseless downpour. The village school was intensely interested in our show. Bright, earnest eyes appeared over the classroom doors as we carried in the theatre. More urchins regarded us through a crack in the door, and a small girl entered our room holding out a penny, shyly and silently. She was sent back to her lessons, but 10 minutes later she escaped and was solemnly entering our room again, holding out the magic penny that would unlock the secret of Mr. Punch. When we were ready, the lively audience came tumbling in, but the persistent maid was the first, still pro-offering her penny. "Now then," said the headmaster, when the audience was arranged, "let us have the pennies." Immediately, every hand was stretched out towards us, 70 hands clutching 70 pennies, held out rigidly like a Roman salute. Having paid their pennies with gravity, they laughed hilariously the whole show through, and while the rain, heavier than ever, poured its fountains down the school windows, we prolonged the entertainment, not having any great desire to hurry back to the tent. When we did return, More pegs had been lifted. A splatter of rain had sprinkled part of our furnishings, and we succumbed to the invitation to make use of the house, the owner of which was away. With dry rugs and dry floors, dry walls and dry ceilings, with tables and with chairs to bend our legs, lean over and lean our backs against instead of sitting stretched out on the floor, we lost all interest in the weather. We found new books to read, and on a sudden temptation released the wireless to hear Chopin being played, and with those exquisitely melancholy notes the little tent standing in the crude grass faded away before all the sophistication, the art and the culture of 1,000 years in 1,000 cities. There had been stars and rain in the night, which in the morning gave place to sun and rain. But the sun predominated, and by midday the camp was dried and packed, and we were leaving the very historic and interesting Alfriston with a clear vision of one of its latter-day hedges, a new Alfriston. But the sun had predominated, and by midday the camp was dried and packed, and we were leaving the very historic and interesting Alfriston with a clear vision of one of its latter-day hedges, a few Alfristonian legs and quantities of rain. But now we saw the hills about, now bright in the sun, and now blue with the moving shadows, and we realised the beauty of the setting of this village on the banks of the willow-planted Cuckmere River. Crossing the bridge, I took the road southwards to follow the downs for a few more days, until they, and my travels, ended at the sea. A great wind came up the valley from Cuckmere Haven, bringing clouds and occasional rain, but this tree-covered road at the foot of Windover Hill, and always with its view over the green waterfields to the pale hills, proved pleasant walking. It was while sheltering under the trees that I heard the interesting tale of how farming does not pay in this desirable country. "I'm giving up my farm," said the farmer. "I'm tired of losing money on it. You do nothing but work, and you lose money. I'm going to get out whilst I've got a bit left. They want me to keep on, but I wouldn't farm it any more, not if I had free rent, and even then that would mean losing money." He then nearly terrified the life out of me by whipping up his gun and discharging both barrels over my head. "Rooks!" he ejaculated. "Too far to kill, but must frighten them. Look at them winter oats now. They were just ready for cutting. Now this storm has laid them out. No room for things like that in these days. Well, this farm's going to be vacant. How would you like to take it on? 800 acres of field and downland." 800 acres of living earth. Crops, cows, sheep, horses, and heaven alone knows what besides. It was an appalling suggestion, and as I looked at my little barrow and my little industry, even the smallest farmer seemed a giant and a prodigious worker in comparison. "Wouldn't know where to begin," I said. "With feeding the pigs, selling the milk, or paying the rent?" "You wouldn't know where to start? No. Every man has his trade. I'm beggared if I should know how to manage your job. It's a gift, your job. I shouldn't know where to start with that." "It's a ridiculous affair, but I've never lost money on it." "I reckon you deserve all you get, pushing that load about. What do you say, eh?" he inquired of the policeman who had joined us under the trees. "Eh?" growled the constable. "Wouldn't suit you, farmer. You stroll about potting at the rooks." "I might think about it," said the farmer. "Farming's no good anyway, and he don't lose money on it." "Yes, but he lives on what he gets. He's like the gypsies. He gets his money first, and then he lives on it, and I'll lay he knows how to cook rabbit pudding on a fire of damp sticks when he's camping." "Not like you," said the farmer. "You get your money out of the rates, and then you do a bit of work for it if there's any going. We've got to do the work first and then live on the money if there's any of that going. And then if there isn't any going in farming, I can tell you, or coming in for that matter, this farm's going to be vacant." With the return of the sun, we all went our several separate ways into the wide world, and I struggled on against the sea breeze, growing stronger and more salty, until, after about 10 minutes, the rain drove me under the lee of a wall. 2 men in the road were already there, huddling themselves away from the heavily drifting rain. They cursed horribly and maintained an alternating grumble. "8 miles to go, and the worst spike on the road when you get there." "Yes, nowhere to dry your clothes. You could go to bed soaked for all anyone cares. A blasted windy open road all the blasted windy way. I just tried to roll a fag just now, but the rain come on the papers and spoiled them. I'm sick of this. Last week you could walk anywhere, any time, and sleep where you like too. You just can't trust the climate in this country for a single day. It's overcoats in the morning and straw hats in the evening." But the poor fella possessed neither. One of the men, suddenly without a word, lurched out into the driving rain and began his trudge, a miserable, huddled figure cowering from the storm. The other remained, waved ineffectively to a passing lorry, and then he too, with hands in his pockets and head bent low, took up the hopeless trail. At Exeat, near to Seaford, I think that's how it's pronounced. Is it Exeat? Is that how you pronounce it? Little village, the sort of village that's no longer there. Next to Seaford, the road took me towards Eastbourne, and after hesitating as to whether I should camp at the farm or go on, I decided to camp the Great South Hill and decided to climb the Great South Hill and camp on its summit. And what a hill! What a confounded great bump! What a huge lump of stuff to get in the way of a little Punch and Judy! There were moments on that hill when I wondered if the barrow was about to push me back into Cuckmere. I waited for a fellow pedestrian to give me a hand, but none came, only the incessant cars, none of which took pity on me. It was a good cause for loitering, and I enjoyed this marvellous road, rising over the bare back of the hill, from which one can see the white breakers on a stormy sea flowing into Cuckmere Haven, and beyond that something of those white cliffs of England breasting the Channel waters. As the road rises, the view began to spread, and here I seemed to get the most expansive sight of downland of all the summer. Northwards, one looked down into the valley, down on West Dean, a compact settlement in the hollow, with farm, church and cottages all set out like a toy. And over the hamlet, spreading east and west, undulated the hills, hill after hill, the great wide passages rolling up to the heavens, a vast stretch of yellow ripening grass that changed its tone and palpitated livingly with the varying pressure of the wind. Towards the west hill and sea met in a glory of golden mist, towards the west, hill and sea met in a glory of golden mist, or a dark cloud covered the sun, and the great rays streamed from behind the cloud to illuminate the distant hills of the Cuckmere Valley. Last page. In a word, everything was perfect on that hilltop, until I discovered that permission for camping could only be obtained by returning to the farm a mile away at the bottom of the hill. I went. I am very patient. But that barrow remained under a hedge, and I came up the hill the second time in an omnibus. Having spent an afternoon in climbing one side of South Hill, I spent the next morning in going down the other side to East Dean, giving a performance on the little green there, and then, taking the road through the valley, I made for Burling Gap. The wind roared in my ears and flattened out the grass in the fields. This was Sussex in a new mood, and coming to the edge of the white cliffs overlooking the sea was like standing at the open door of the country. Here the raging Channel waters had ravaged the beloved green hills, and in a wild turmoil of wind and rushing water the salty stinging sea was beating against the inner heart, the great white interior of the Downs. It was exciting, exhilarating, and wonderfully bracing, but terrifying after the gentle atmosphere of the mild green slopes inland. It was there, standing in the harsh gale on the arid beach beneath the chalk cliffs, that I realised the essential, significant Sussex, the warm, sleepy weald of deep lanes, leafy woods, and comfortable farms, out of which rise the gentle pastures on the warm sunny hills, that enchanting range of grassy mounds, the Sussex Downs. I've read that a bit, right? I'm just going to read that last line one more time. It was there, standing in the harsh gale on the arid beach beneath the chalk cliffs, that I realised the essential, significant Sussex, the warm, sleepy weald of deep lanes, leafy woods, and comfortable farms, out of which rise the gentle pastures of the warm sunny hills, that enchanting range of grassy mounds, the South Downs. The end. So there we are. He gets down to Beachy Head, basically, and that's it. Another book in the pile of red books. There we are. That's filled up the hour, didn't it? God, that was quite hard, actually, towards the end. It was just not as easy as the earlier chapters. 5 shillings worth of expectancy. I'm in a car at the moment. Oh, I read that. Yes. Used to get a small bag of chips. Read all of that. Hang on. The mouse is... let's go down and see where we are. The burger vase, I can't read now because I've been looking at in front of me and now trying to adjust the eyes. Falgas, or whatever his name, however you pronounce it, was the original cartoonist who drew Punch, like Think for their magazine. Okay. We have a wood-fired pizza van that comes round once a week. Blimey, do you? Linda Kane. I need to explore Sussex next year after all these great books. You do, Turbo Stream. Come down and visit the Voby. 2 young chaps started the business during lockdown, says Linda Kane. Oh, the pizza thing. Mary, we had fish fan came... Many a fish fan came out to Ashington. It was a great every Friday. Lion's still there, I think. Some of the street fruit... Oh, they're talking about street foods, blah, blah, blah. Right, sure. You couldn't if you tried. Can't chop onions. That would be certainly make your eyes water. It was a summer job for the author. I guess the winters were writing his books, says Alan. Yes, I imagine the books must have brought in some money. What a great book, Andrew Norris. That was lovely. He finished it up in my neck of the woods. There we go. Lovely. Cracking adventure, that one, Richard. Well done. I will look for that book, Andrew. Oh, yes, sorry. Towards the end of that, it seemed hard reading. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just losing the knack than I did at the beginning. But it was, yeah. So that was Sussex. Now, I want to thank... I don't know if Michael White... Yeah, Michael White is there. Thank you very much, Michael White, for the first book in the series that he wrote, The Sussex Peep Show, which he sent me very kindly. And it's a lovely book in which he describes the whole process of coming to terms with starting the Punch and Judy show, the puppets, and making the puppets, how they control him, and his first foray into doing it. And it might be, I think, interesting to read that, but not straight away, but maybe in the spring. Andrew Norris is currently making puppets, and if you watch the Vogue show tonight, I have a video by him. We will play in the show this evening of his puppets and how he has made them so far. So that is going to be good. And I need to thank Linda Kane for the second book, I think this is, Vagabonds and Puppets, by the same author. Thank you very much. And again, this is another foray into it. But I wanted to show you this, because this is great fun. In old second-hand books, you often come across old things. And look at these. It's probably out of focus on that camera. Look at these Swan branded. It's not going to come on. Focus, you swine. Bloody cameras. It's because it can see me, I think. Focus, focus, focus. Why won't you focus? Anyway, you can just about see them. There we go. It's got it. These old kettles, don't they look repugnant now? They look really old-fashioned, don't they? But coffee percolators, toasters, fires, urns, electric blankets, ground base, aluminium, hollowware. Bulpit and Sons Limited in Birmingham. The electric kettle is guaranteed for a period of 1 year against electrical breakdown or mechanical failure. Instructions for use. See that the kettle is only used on the voltage marked on the base and that there is sufficient water to cover the element. It is suitable for use on AC and DC mains. They don't tell you that anymore, do they? Switch on the current. After the water has reached the desired temperature, switch off and remove the connector before emptying. When not in use, leave the flex disconnected from the kettle as a precaution against anyone inadvertently switching on the electric without water in the kettle. Should this occur, however, the element will be protected by the safety device. The safety device comes into operation by throwing off the connector, thus disconnecting the electric current. Any obstruction of the connector which might prevent this must therefore be avoided. The kettle will be ready to use again after cooling. This can be accelerated by pouring cold water into the kettle, when the action of replacing the connector will automatically reset the safety device. Oh my God, it goes on and on. Your electricity service centre or electrical contractor will be pleased to advise you in the event of any breakdowns occurring. It's almost worth buying a book just to get those instructions. I have a parents' brown electric kettle, a wedding present in 1945. It worked for years, says Lee Lawson, and didn't break. But I wouldn't risk trying it now. Good for you. There we go. Thank you so much, everybody. Now, before we go, the next book. I'm going to be away Wednesday and Thursday this week. So I'm going to suggest we have a break and reconvene next Monday and start a new book then, if that's all right. Because there's no point starting first chapter tomorrow and then having 2 days off and then just doing a chapter on Friday. It's a bit sort of jiggery pokery. And also, I haven't 100% decided. We've got a book. I think Lee Lawson's got the book, but I've got an online version of it called Luck Lifting or something. I can't remember what it's called. But yes, but I definitely would like to read these books over, not consecutively, although they are very beautifully written and they goes to different places. But I think we'd like to come back to those, particularly as Andrew Norris is making puppets, and I'm going to do some reenactment stuff with it, I think. I still use an iron from 1966 that was my nan's. Good for you. Yes, a van collection caper. Absolutely, yes. And that's the thing. I can tour around in the van, assuming I get it, which I'm pretty much certain I will, and visit the places he talks about. So, the spring is going to be the time for that when it's a bit warmer. Lift luck on southern roads. Yes, that's right. Lift luck. What a strange title. Lift luck. In other words, hitching on the southern roads. I haven't read it. I've read about the first 4 or 5 pages to see if it read okay. Seemed to. So I think we'll start that next Monday. Anyway, that's it for today. Go and get the essay lit now. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time. Have a good rest of the week if you don't join me on the readings, but we'll start again next Monday. How about that? Okie dokie. Take care and look after yourselves. Bye for now. Bye. How do I turn this off? Oh, yes.